When did you see someone destroy their own happiness? When my best friend was getting married, she decided me and her weren't close enough and made a change to the guest list. Real family only, she announced during a mass dinner 3 months away. That means you, and you, she pointed to me and her own adopted sisters, are all not welcome. I had just paid for my maid of honor dress, and her sisters were kids with autism who never got invited anywhere. But they're your flower girls, Jenny. And then they can pick flowers outside. But they're not welcome, she interrupted me. The girls started crying and ran off. That's when I decided fine. I took my name off the guest list and took her sisters out for ice cream and shopping with my own friends. And the best part? Something my dear Cassie never even knew. I had spent over $4,000 of my own money on her wedding. Flowers, decorations, the works. The first week I was gone, Cassie called me sobbing. The venue just called about a massive plumbing failure. The whole place is flooded. I stayed quiet. She didn't know my dad owned it and had given it to her for free. Every other venue wants $15,000 minimum with this short notice. She had to drain her savings account completely. Then her photographer canceled. Creative differences. The only replacement charged $5,000. She had to take out a loan. On week 2, her florist called. Our supplier had a mishap. All your orchids are dead. She'd have to switch to carnations or pay triple for new orchids. She paid triple. The cake designer's mother got sick. Every other baker was booked. She ended up ordering from the grocery store. 5 tiers became 2 sheet cakes. The cake tasting she'd filmed for Instagram versus what she'd actually serve. People would notice. Week 3, her bridesmaids started dropping. I can't support how you're treating your sisters. This isn't who I thought you were. Those girls asked me why you hate them. Down to 4. The bachelorette party in Vegas became wine at her apartment where 2 people showed up. Then the makeup artist canceled. Double booked, so sorry. The hairstylist had a family emergency. The videographer got a better opportunity. Every replacement cost triple and her credit card started declining. She had to borrow from her parents. They asked why everything was falling apart, but she couldn't explain it. Her mom stepped in to help, calling vendors personally. But they all said the same thing. Sorry, we can't. No explanations, just flat refusal. One finally told her, ask your daughter what she did to those little girls. Her mom confronted her that night. What did you do? I uninvited them. It's my wedding. Her mom left without another word. The final vendor meeting was pathetic. 6 bridesmaids became 2. The menu went from 5 courses to buffet style. The 300-person guest list was down to 30 confirmed. The champagne toast became sparkling cider. The chocolate fountain became Hershey's Kisses in bowls. She'd spent $47,000 trying to fix everything. Triple her original budget. Her fiancé asked if they should postpone. Maybe when things calm down? She screamed that nothing would calm down. Everyone had abandoned her. The whole world was against her. He slept at his brother's that night. Her parents stopped offering to help. Even her own mom said, you brought this on yourself when you hurt those babies. The wedding happened in a park with 20 guests. Cassie wore a $200 dress from a department store sale. Her cousin did her makeup in the car. Plastic chairs, supermarket flowers, a Bluetooth speaker for music. But what none of us knew was that Cassie had one last trick up her sleeve. 3 days after that sad park wedding, I was making breakfast when my phone rang with a number I didn't recognize. The voice on the other end introduced herself as Cassie's lawyer and said she needed to discuss some serious legal matters with me and my father. My eggs burned on the stove as she explained that Cassie had been recording conversations for months, including one where my dad admitted pulling the venue. She had hired this lawyer to sue us both for something called tortious interference, which basically meant we'd deliberately ruined her contracts. My stomach felt like it dropped through the floor as I realized Cassie had been documenting everything while playing the victim to everyone. The lawyer said we'd be getting official papers soon, and suggested we find our own legal representation immediately. I hung up and immediately called my dad, who was at his venue setting up for an afternoon wedding. He went quiet when I told him about the lawsuit, then said he'd been expecting something like this. The next morning, a process server showed up at my dad's business right in front of 3 couples who were touring the venue for their own weddings. The man handed my dad a thick envelope and had him sign for it while the couples watched awkwardly. Inside were legal papers demanding $50,000 in actual damages, plus more for punitive damages for what they called malicious conspiracy to destroy a wedding. My dad read through every page while I sat in his office, both of us getting more worried with each paragraph. The lawsuit laid out everything: how we'd coordinated with vendors, how we'd pulled the venue, how we'd cost Cassie her dream wedding out of spite. I immediately started calling all the vendors who'd helped me, starting with the florist who'd been so understanding about the whole situation. She answered on the 3rd ring, but her voice went cold when I explained about the lawsuit. Turns out Cassie had called her 2 weeks ago, acting friendly and asking questions about why she'd really canceled. The florist thought Cassie was just trying to understand what happened, so she'd been honest about coordinating with me. Cassie had recorded the whole conversation without telling her. The photographer had a similar story. Cassie had called him pretending to want to hire him for something else, then steered the conversation to the wedding. The cake designer, the makeup artist, the hairstylist, they'd all gotten friendly calls that turned into recorded confessions. Every single vendor was panicking now because they could be sued too for breach of contract. Some of them had already gotten threatening letters from Cassie's lawyer saying they might be added to the lawsuit. My dad hired a defense lawyer that afternoon, a woman who specialized in business disputes. She looked through all the papers and listened to our side of the story, then delivered the bad news. The case had real merit because we'd admitted to intentional interference with business relationships. Even if we won, which wasn't guaranteed, the legal fees alone would cost thousands of dollars. She started preparing our defense, but warned us this could get expensive fast. That evening, I was cleaning my apartment, trying to distract myself from the mess, when Derek called. His voice sounded different, hurt and confused in a way I'd never heard before. He'd just found out about my involvement from Cassie's lawyer, who'd contacted him as a potential witness. He couldn't believe I'd orchestrated the whole vendor boycott while pretending to be neutral when he'd called me during the disasters. I tried explaining about the disabled sisters, how Cassie had made them cry, how they'd been so excited about being flower girls. Derek listened, but then said something that hit hard. 2 wrongs don't make a right, and what I'd done was calculate and cruel even if Cassie had been wrong first. He wasn't taking sides in the lawsuit, but he made it clear our friendship was over. He couldn't trust someone who could plan something so elaborate while lying to his face about it. After we hung up, I sat on my couch feeling sick about losing one of my oldest friends. Within 2 days, the story exploded on wedding forums after Cassie posted her version online. She painted herself as a victim of jealous sabotage by a bitter former friend who couldn't handle being removed from the wedding party. She included screenshots of vendor messages and even audio clips from some of the recorded calls. The comments section turned into a battlefield with people taking sides. Many sided with Cassie since she had actual recordings proving the conspiracy. People called me psychotic, said I should be in jail, said I'd ruined what should have been the happiest day of her life. Others defended me, saying Cassie deserved it for discriminating against disabled children. The forum moderators eventually locked the thread, but screenshots were already spreading to other sites. 3 vendors got scared about their own legal exposure and agreed to give sworn statements supporting Cassie's case. They claimed I'd pressured them into boycotting her wedding and had threatened to ruin their businesses if they didn't comply. That wasn't true at all, but they were trying to save themselves from getting sued. Their statements made our case much weaker, according to our lawyer. My dad's venue started getting destroyed online by people who'd never even been there. 1-star reviews poured in calling him unprofessional, discriminatory, and corrupt for pulling the venue from an innocent bride. He tried reporting the fake reviews, but the damage was spreading. Bookings for next season dropped by 30% within a week as couples canceled their deposits. His business that he'd built over 20 years was taking serious damage. Then something unexpected happened when Adriana Silva reached out through social media. She'd been Cassie's lead bridesmaid before quitting and wanted to help our case. She had text messages where Cassie had called her adopted sisters embarrassing burdens who would ruin the wedding photos. There were worse things too. Cassie complaining about having to pretend to love them for her parents' sake. Adriana sent screenshots to our lawyer the next morning, along with voice messages where Cassie complained about having to include them in family photos. 2 days later, Katie Morton contacted me through Facebook saying she had something important to show us about the wedding situation. Katie worked as a wedding coordinator at a different venue and had been at that dinner 3 months ago as someone's +1. She'd recorded the whole speech on her phone because she couldn't believe what she was seeing. The video showed everything clearly, with Cassie standing up at the head of the table pointing directly at those crying kids while announcing they weren't real family. You could hear the girls sobbing in the background and see other guests looking shocked and uncomfortable. Katie sent the file to our lawyer that afternoon and agreed to provide a sworn statement about what she witnessed. Our lawyer called a meeting at her office the next week to discuss strategy. She spread out all the evidence on the conference table, including the recordings, screenshots, and witness statements we'd gathered. She explained that while this helped show Cassie's character and gave context for why we acted, it didn't change the basic legal fact that we'd deliberately interfered with her vendor contracts. The law didn't have exceptions for doing it because someone was mean to disabled kids. She recommended we seriously consider settling before legal costs ate up more of my dad's business funds. The next morning, Cassie's lawyer sent a formal settlement offer by certified mail. They would drop the lawsuit completely if we paid $30,000 within 30 days, plus issued a public apology on social media, admitting I had sabotaged the wedding out of jealousy. The alternative was going to trial, where legal fees alone could cost $60,000 or more even if we won. My dad read the letter 3 times before setting it down on his desk. I was so mad I could barely speak, but my dad stayed calm and practical like always. His venue couldn't survive a long court battle that would drain the business accounts and generate more bad publicity. He suggested we counteroffer $15,000 with no admission of wrongdoing and definitely no public apology. Our lawyer drafted the counteroffer that afternoon, emphasizing that we had strong evidence of Cassie's discriminatory behavior toward disabled children. While we were waiting for their response, I got an unexpected call from the adopted sisters' parents. They'd heard about the lawsuit through mutual friends and wanted to thank me for standing up for their daughters when nobody else would. The girls had been so excited about being flower girls and had practiced walking down the aisle for weeks before Cassie crushed their hearts. They offered to testify about the emotional damage Cassie had caused, including how the older girl still asked why Aunt Cassie hated her. They also had medical records showing increased anxiety symptoms requiring therapy after the incident. 3 days later, Cassie's lawyer sent back a one-line response rejecting our counteroffer completely. That same afternoon, Cassie went on a posting spree across Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. She uploaded screenshots of vendor messages, portions of the recorded calls where vendors admitted to coordinating with me, and a long post about how her special day was ruined by a jealous friend. She tagged local wedding groups and bridal forums, making sure maximum people would see her version. The post started getting hundreds of shares and comments, with many people calling me a monster who destroyed an innocent bride's dream. Some commenters found my social media profiles and started sending nasty messages. My dad's venue Facebook page got flooded with angry comments from strangers who'd never even been there. I was at the grocery store 2 days later when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was Carson Bauer, Derek's brother, asking if we could meet for coffee because he had something important to tell me privately. We met at a small cafe downtown where Carson looked around nervously before leaning in close. Derek was having serious second thoughts about Cassie after watching her turn so vindictive and cruel instead of just moving forward with their marriage. He'd tried talking to her about dropping the lawsuit and focusing on their future, but she'd screamed at him for not supporting her. Carson said Derek was starting to see a side of Cassie he'd never noticed before. Our lawyer decided to dig deeper into Cassie's online history and filed subpoenas for her full social media records going back 5 years. What she found changed everything about our defense strategy. There were multiple posts where Cassie had complained about disabled children at restaurants, movie theaters, and other events, calling them mood killers and saying they should be kept at home. One post from 2 years ago said special needs kids at weddings were attention-seeking distractions from the bride. She'd deleted these posts recently, but the subpoena pulled them from the platform's archives. Our lawyer immediately began preparing to use this pattern of discrimination as part of our defense. The story somehow made its way to disability advocacy forums and Facebook groups after someone shared screenshots of Cassie's old posts. Within days, several major organizations were discussing the case and offering to file amicus briefs supporting our position. Parents of disabled children started sharing their own stories of discrimination and exclusion. The hashtag #DefendDisabledKids started trending locally. Cassie's lawyer called an emergency meeting with her client as the situation spiraled beyond what they'd expected. They realized the case was attracting the wrong kind of attention, with Cassie becoming the villain in a viral story about discriminating against disabled children. Instead of a simple contract interference case, it was turning into a public relations nightmare that could follow Cassie forever. Her lawyer strongly suggested switching to mediation to resolve this quietly before more damage was done to Cassie's reputation. I spent the next 3 weeks calling parents from the sisters' therapy group, and every single one wanted to help. The therapy center had a small waiting room where parents would chat while their kids were in sessions, and everyone knew those 2 girls. One mom showed me videos on her phone of the younger sister helping her son during a meltdown at the center's holiday party. Another dad had pictures from a sensory-friendly movie event where the older girl had shared her noise-canceling headphones with his daughter who'd forgotten hers. The occupational therapist wrote a letter about how the girls always helped set up activities for younger kids and never complained when sessions ran long. I collected 17 witness statements total, and each one talked about specific times the sisters had shown kindness to other kids. My lawyer organized everything into a folder with tabs for different categories like community impact and emotional development. The morning of mediation arrived, and I put on my only business suit while my dad wore his best polo shirt. We drove to the mediator's office in a strip mall between a nail salon and a tax place. Cassie's car was already in the parking lot, some fancy lease she'd gotten right before the wedding planning started. Inside the waiting room, she sat in a black suit with her hair in a tight bun, holding a thick binder labeled evidence in gold letters. Her lawyer sat next to her, typing on his phone, and didn't look up when we walked in. I carried a simple manila folder with the photos I'd taken of the sisters trying on their flower girl dresses at the store 3 months before everything fell apart. The mediator called us into a conference room with a long table and uncomfortable chairs. She was a retired judge with gray hair and reading glasses on a chain who introduced herself as Judge Carolyn Lake. Cassie immediately opened her binder and started pulling out printed screenshots and transcripts she'd made of the recorded calls. Judge Lake put on her glasses and looked through the papers while Cassie's lawyer explained how we'd violated business interference laws. The judge picked up one transcript and asked if any actual contracts had been signed between Cassie and these vendors. Cassie's lawyer admitted most were verbal agreements, but argued that didn't matter for interference claims. Judge Lake set down the papers and turned to look at the photos I'd brought. The girls were smiling so big in those pictures, holding up the puffy pink dresses against themselves in the store mirror. She studied them for a long moment, then asked Cassie directly how she felt seeing her sisters that happy about being in her wedding. Cassie's face got red and she started crying about how her perfect day was ruined and she'd never get another chance at her dream wedding. Judge Lake waited for her to stop, then asked if she thought those little girls would ever get back their excitement about being flower girls for their big sister. The room went quiet, and Cassie just stared at the table. We took a break after an hour, and I went outside to get some air. That's when I saw Derek's car pull into the parking lot. He got out wearing jeans and a wrinkled t-shirt like he'd just rolled out of bed and rushed over here. He walked straight past me without saying anything and went inside. 5 minutes later, Cassie's scream echoed through the whole building. I rushed back in to find Derek standing at the head of the conference table telling everyone he needed to say something important. He announced that regardless of how the lawsuit turned out, he was calling off their engagement permanently. Cassie jumped up screaming that I'd poisoned him against her and this was all part of my plan to steal him. Derek stayed calm and said her behavior over the past month had shown him who she really was. He couldn't marry someone who would hurt children, then spend weeks playing victim and trying to destroy people's lives over consequences she brought on herself. He looked at Judge Lake and said he'd testify about everything he'd witnessed if this went to trial, including Cassie's comments about her sisters being embarrassments and her plans to exclude them from family events even before the wedding. Cassie's lawyer grabbed her arm and pulled her back into her chair, whispering urgently in her ear. Judge Lake suggested we take another break while everyone processed this development. Derek left without looking at anyone, and Cassie ran to the bathroom crying. Her lawyer stayed in the conference room making phone calls. When we came back together, Judge Lake proposed a solution where both sides would drop all claims and pay our own legal fees. We'd sign mutual non-disclosure agreements and no money would change hands. She said this would let everyone move forward without admitting fault or continuing expensive legal proceedings. Cassie wanted to keep fighting, but her lawyer leaned over and told her without Derek's support, she'd lose any sympathy from a jury. His testimony about her treating the children badly would destroy her case completely. They whispered back and forth for 10 minutes before Cassie's lawyer said they'd accept the mediation agreement. We spent another hour going through paperwork and signing documents. My dad still had to deal with the damage to his business from all the bad reviews and lost bookings, but at least the legal threat was over. Cassie left first, slamming the door so hard the pictures on the wall shook. 2 weeks passed before I heard from Adriana, who'd been the first bridesmaid to quit. She called to say she was organizing something special for the sisters at a sensory-friendly venue downtown. All the bridesmaids who'd quit wanted to come celebrate the girls properly since they never got their moment at the actual wedding. The party was at a sensory-friendly play center downtown with soft lighting and quiet music that wouldn't overwhelm the girls. Adriana had decorated the whole place with pink and purple streamers, the sisters' favorite colors. The girls showed up wearing the flower girl dresses they never got to use. These puffy pink things with layers of tulle that made them spin when they walked. Their parents had done their hair in little braids with white ribbons woven through. All 6 bridesmaids who quit Cassie's wedding were there, plus about 20 other people from the autism support group. The girls grabbed baskets of rose petals Adriana had prepared and started throwing them everywhere while everyone clapped and cheered. Their mom was crying and taking pictures with her phone while their dad kept wiping his eyes and pretending he wasn't emotional. The girls ran around throwing petals at everyone, giggling so hard they could barely breathe. We had a cake shaped like a flower basket, and the girls got to cut it together with a plastic knife while everyone sang. They danced to Disney songs and showed off their dresses to anyone who would look. By the end of the party, both girls had fallen asleep in their dad's arms, still clutching leftover rose petals in their little fists. That night, Derek texted me a long message saying he wanted to thank me for showing him who Cassie really was, even though I hadn't meant to. He said he was in therapy now dealing with how he'd missed all the red flags for so long. He couldn't believe he almost married someone who would treat kids that way. Over the next few weeks, my dad's venue started getting bookings again as wedding season approached, and people forgot about the drama. Some of the vendors who'd helped me boycott Cassie's wedding became regular customers, sending all their clients to my dad's place. The florist started doing all our arrangements at cost. The photographer gave us priority booking. Word spread that we stood up for those kids, and suddenly we were the good guys in the wedding community. I heard from mutual friends that Cassie had packed up and moved to another city for what she called a fresh start. Her social media went completely private, and she stopped posting about the wedding or anything related to it. The friend who told me said Cassie was telling people in her new city that her wedding was small and intimate by choice. I started going to the Sisters Autism Support Group meetings every week to help plan events that included everyone. We organized sensory-friendly movie nights and quiet hours at the local museum. It felt good to use my planning skills for something that actually mattered. The parents in the group treated me like family and always saved me a seat at meetings. 3 months passed, and Carson called me out of the blue to share some news. Derek had started dating Katie, the wedding coordinator who'd provided the footage of Cassie pointing at the crying girls. They'd bonded over their shared disgust at how Cassie had acted. Carson said they were taking things slow, but Derek seemed happier than he'd been in years. Katie understood what he'd been through and didn't judge him for missing the warning signs about Cassie. A week later, Cassie's mom showed up at my apartment with a box of cookies and red eyes from crying. She wanted to apologize for everything her daughter had done and for the lawsuit that almost happened. She'd been donating to autism charities every month trying to make up for what Cassie did to those girls. She said she couldn't sleep at night thinking about how her daughter had turned out and where she'd gone wrong as a mother. I told her it wasn't her fault, but she shook her head and said she should have seen the signs earlier. Meanwhile, the 3 vendors who'd testified against me in their statements started losing business fast. Word travels quick in the wedding industry, and everyone knew they'd turned on someone defending disabled kids. The florist who'd given a statement lost her biggest corporate contract. The makeup artist had 3 brides cancel in 1 week. The DJ couldn't book a single wedding for the next season. People in our industry have long memories, and nobody wanted to work with vendors who'd betray someone standing up for children. My dad decided to implement a new policy at the venue where we'd offer free space once a month for inclusion-focused events. The first event was a birthday party for a kid with Down syndrome whose parents couldn't afford a venue. The local news picked up the story, and suddenly we were booked solid for the next year. Companies wanted to hold their events at the venue that stood up for disabled kids. Brides loved the idea of getting married somewhere with values. The free monthly events actually brought in more paying customers than we'd ever had before. 6 months after everything went down, Carson called me again with more news. Derek and Katie were planning their own wedding, something small with just family and close friends. Carson laughed and said at least this time he knew the bride wasn't secretly horrible. He asked if I wanted to come since I'd inadvertently brought them together. The wedding would be simple. Nothing like what Cassie had originally planned. Just 50 people who actually cared about them in my dad's venue with real flowers and homemade food. Katie had already asked if the sisters could be flower girls, and their parents had cried when they heard. The girls had been practicing throwing petals in their backyard for weeks, their mom told me. They wanted to do it perfectly this time, and kept asking when they'd get to wear their pretty dresses again. 6 months passed before I saw anyone from Cassie's old friend group at the grocery store near my apartment. The former bridesmaid was buying wine and almost dropped the bottle when she spotted me by the frozen foods. She grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the bakery section where nobody could hear us. She told me Cassie had moved 3 states away and was already engaged to some guy she met on a dating app who had no idea about the wedding disaster or what she did to those kids. The guy was apparently loaded and planning some huge destination wedding in Mexico. I stood there holding my frozen pizza and felt bad for this poor guy who had no clue what he was getting into. But then remembered how getting involved with Cassie's life had almost cost my dad his business, and decided this wasn't my problem anymore. The bridesmaid said Cassie was telling everyone in her new city that her first wedding was small by choice, and that she'd cut toxic people from her life, including her adopted sisters, who she claimed had behavioral problems. I paid for my groceries and left without asking for more details, because I'd learned my lesson about getting tangled up in Cassie's drama. 2 weeks later, the sisters' parents called and asked if I could come to the courthouse for something important. They wouldn't say what over the phone, but sounded excited, so I took the morning off work and drove downtown. The courthouse lobby was packed with their extended family, all wearing matching t-shirts with the girls' faces printed on them. The adoption finalization ceremony was happening that day, and they wanted me there as part of their chosen family, since I'd stood up for the girls when their own sister wouldn't. The judge read through the paperwork while the girls bounced in their seats wearing new dresses their grandma had bought them. When the judge signed the final decree making them officially sisters forever, the whole courtroom erupted in cheers, and the girls ran around hugging everyone, including the bailiff who was trying not to cry. Their mom pulled me aside afterward and said they considered me an honorary aunt now and expected me at every birthday and holiday from now on. That same afternoon, Derek called and asked if I could meet him and Katie at a coffee shop because they had something to ask me. They were planning their wedding for next spring and wanted me as a bridesmaid since I had experience handling wedding disasters and knew how to deal with vendor drama if anything went wrong. Katie laughed and said she'd already checked with all the vendors to make sure none of them had issues with me after the Cassie situation. I accepted immediately, and they handed me a simple navy dress they'd already bought in my size because they knew I'd say yes. The wedding would be small with just 50 guests at my dad's venue, with the sisters as flower girls doing the job they should have done the first time. Almost a year passed before anything else happened with the whole situation. My dad's venue had been doing the monthly inclusion events for disabled kids and families for over a year when the city announced their community awards. The venue won the Inclusion Award with the presentation specifically mentioning how sometimes good things come from bad situations without naming Cassie directly. My dad had to give a speech and talked about how seeing those 2 girls cry had changed his whole perspective on what his business should represent. The local paper ran a story with a photo of him surrounded by kids from the autism support group who'd had birthday parties at the venue for free. 3 days after the article ran, I got a Facebook message from someone I didn't know, claiming Cassie was spreading lies about me in her new city. The message said Cassie was telling people I'd sabotaged her wedding out of jealousy, and that I'd manipulated her disabled sisters against her. I read it once, then deleted it and blocked the sender because I was done with that chapter of my life completely. The autism support group president called the next week, asking if I'd speak at their annual fundraiser about the importance of standing up for vulnerable children. I agreed, but made it clear I'd only focus on the positive outcomes like the inclusion events and the community that had formed around supporting these kids. The fundraiser was held at a hotel ballroom with 300 people who'd each paid $75 to attend. I kept my speech short and focused on how one moment of standing up for what's right had created a ripple effect of positive change in our community. Derek and Katie's wedding day arrived on a perfect Saturday in May, with clear skies and a light breeze. The venue looked beautiful with simple white flowers and string lights that Katie had hung herself the night before. The 50 guests were all people who genuinely loved the couple, with no obligation invites or distant relatives who barely knew them. The sisters wore purple dresses and had practiced their flower girl walks. So many times their mom said they did it in their sleep. When the music started, they walked down the aisle throwing petals with huge smiles while everyone took pictures and cheered them on. Katie had given them special baskets with their names embroidered on them that they clutched like treasures. Watching those girls finally get their moment as flower girls with everyone smiling and celebrating them made my chest tight with emotion. This was what weddings were supposed to be about, with real joy and love instead of perfect Instagram posts and showing off for strangers. My dad stood next to me during the ceremony, and I saw tears running down his face when the sisters threw their last petals and ran to sit with their parents. He leaned over and whispered that seeing those kids so happy made all the legal fees and drama worthwhile, because his venue had never felt more like a place of real love than it did right then. The reception moved to the covered patio area where Derek stood up and clinked his glass for attention while everyone turned to watch him. He started talking about friendship and loyalty, and then looked straight at me, saying I was the kind of friend who did the right thing even when it cost me everything. The room got quiet as he explained how integrity meant standing up for vulnerable kids even when it got complicated and expensive, and thanked me for showing him what real character looked like. People started clapping, and the sisters ran over to hug me while their parents wiped tears from their faces, and my dad squeezed my shoulder. Katie threw her bouquet during the traditional toss, and when she caught it herself on purpose, she walked straight to the sisters and placed it in their hands together. The girls squealed and jumped up and down, showing everyone their prize, while the photographer snapped pictures and guests cheered louder than they had all day. The younger sister held the flowers up to her nose and announced they smelled like happiness, which made everyone laugh and cry at the same time. 2 years went by without any drama, and I focused on my job and volunteering with the autism support group every month. Then one afternoon, Adriana called me out of nowhere, saying she heard through mutual friends that Cassie's second engagement had crashed and burned spectacularly. Apparently, the new guy's sister was a special education teacher who did some digging after meeting Cassie and found the old lawsuit documents online. She showed her brother everything, including the part about Cassie calling disabled children mood killers and embarrassing burdens on social media. He broke up with her that same day and told everyone in their friend group exactly why he was calling off the engagement. Cassie had to move cities again because word spread fast in their social circles about what kind of person she really was. Meanwhile, the sisters were doing amazing, with the older one mainstreaming into regular classes with just an aide for support. She made 3 close friends who came to her birthday party at my dad's venue, where she got to be the princess she always wanted to be. The younger sister discovered she had real talent for art and started winning local contests with her paintings of flowers and butterflies. Their mom sent me photos of every award ceremony and art show, where the girl stood proud holding her ribbons and certificates. She told me that whole wedding disaster turned out to be the best thing that ever happened, because it connected them to a community that truly supported their family. They found therapists and programs and other families who understood their journey and celebrated their daughters, instead of seeing them as problems. The girls had friends now, and birthday party invitations and sleepovers and all the normal kid stuff they'd missed out on before. Looking back at everything that happened, I knew I'd make the same choice again, even knowing the lawsuits and lost friendships and thousands in legal fees. Those 2 little girls deserved someone to fight for them when their own sister threw them away like they were nothing. Sometimes doing what's right means dealing with messy consequences and accepting that not everyone will understand or approve of your choices. But watching those kids bloom into confident, happy girls who knew they were loved and valued made every hard moment worth it completely. Well, folks, that was definitely a journey. Appreciate you being here and wondering through it all with me. Until we meet again, take care. Like the video, it helps more than you think.